According to the Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education, $1 worth of Bitcoin takes 17 megajoules of energy to mine. That's more than double the amount of energy it took back in the day to mine $1 worth of copper, gold, and platinum.
The machines require more power, and more power requires larger capacity, bigger transformers, higher voltage.
Ultimately, the energy intensiveness comes from the fact that solving these mathematical puzzles is challenging, and you have to expend a certain amount of compute power against it to be the fastest one to actually solve the puzzle. And putting as much computational energy into that challenge as possible increases your ability to actually win. It's intentionally inefficient.
Each building is 100 megawatts. For each 100 megawatt building, you can fit 30,000 new ASIC miners in it. In a Bitcoin mine, the consumption is basically taken by the miners. Each miner has about 3,000 watts that it's pulling. An older miner, an older generation, the S9, which was released in September 2017, was only pulling 1,350. The miners now are at 3,000.
So, at capacity, this facility will have 750 megawatts of electricity flowing through it, enough to power 150,000 Texas homes during peak demand. That's a lot of juice. How do they manage to keep all those miners cool?
Our ideal goal is to keep the ambient temperature around 81 degrees. There's a lake about a mile from here, and so underground we have a 8-inch line with 1,000 GPM pump where we pump literally the water through this mile-long pipe into the facility, and it actually goes into holding tanks that then recirculate the water, and it pumps it back into these evaporative cooling walls that are 12 feet tall. Water is actually dripping down the wall of that evaporative cooling cell, and then as the air comes through it, it actually cools from 16 to 20 degrees difference between the front of the wall and the inside of the wall. The miners have fans, they have intake fans, and there's thousands of those fans running, and they actually suck the ambient air through the miner, and then there's an exhaust fan. It actually pushes the air through the chips and into the heat aisle. As it goes through the miner, it then heats up because the chips, it's a processing, so it gets really hot, and then we capture the heat on the inside of the heat wall, and then it is evacuated out of the building through a quote-unquote chimney-like environment.
Inside the heat aisle, it literally feels like an oven. One Windstone employee estimates that it can get as hot as 140 degrees Fahrenheit in here.
So the S9 has a hash rate of 13.5 terahash. The new S19s are 110 terahash.
Hash rate measures how many computations a miner can do, usually in a second. So how much money can each miner potentially make each day?
Currently, a S19 with 110 terahash, the profitability every day for one machine is 30 USD.
Okay, so $30 times 30,000 miners times 2 big buildings, nearly $2 million a day for a facility this size.
We have a full staff of 120 employees. We work 24 hours a day, 3 shifts.
There are definitely some increased efficiencies on the horizon, such as faster processing chips for the miners, cooling them in immersion technology, but at approximately 73 terawatt hours annually, Bitcoin's energy consumption is more than the energy it takes to run every single television set in America.
I think ultimately the energy consumption question is a bit of a what is it relative to? When we look at our financial system as a whole, or even just Wall Street, to power Wall Street, which runs almost entirely off of computation today anyway, and high-frequency trading algorithms. When you look at mining just to earn Bitcoin, well, that's not necessarily so awesome.
According to the Digiconomist's Bitcoin Energy Consumption Index, one Bitcoin transaction takes more than 1,500 kilowatt hours to complete. That's more than 50 days of power for the average U.S. household.
Bitcoin is what I like to think of as a calculator. So it's this sort of old school, very clunky system that gets the job done. When you look at what's happened with newer blockchains like Ethereum 2 and Definity, is that they've actually implemented a totally different system for essentially doing the same thing. And Ethereum is upgrading to a more energy efficient way of securing the network.